What's going on, everybody? LK here. So tomorrow is going to be Arc Revo World Finals. This is Arc System Works World Tour. This year they have DNF Duel and Guilty Gear Strive going on, and I'm here specifically to talk about Guilty Gear Strive. So I'm going to be talking about the regions, the stories, and the players that are involved in this tournament. The only way you can qualify for this tournament is not a point system like the Dragon Ball FighterZ World Tour has done for a lot of years. You have to win one of the official Arc Revo Tour stops to win, and they are split up between North America, Europe, and Asia. So let's take a look. So you're going to be hearing me talk about three main regions. So first is going to be North America, but when we really say North America for Guilty Gear in particular, we're generally talking about US and Canada, and specifically for the Arc Revo Finals, we're going to be talking about the United States. All three countries do compete with each other, but there's no qualifiers in Canada or Mexico. If you follow Dragon Ball, you know that Dragon Ball does have a qualifier in Mexico. Usually it's called Thunderstruck, but they do not have one this year for the upcoming finals. And then on top of that too, Americans and Canadians can travel freely in between the three countries in North America, but if you're Mexican, you need a visa to go to the US. So you don't often see Mexican players come up to the US to compete in Guilty Gear Strive offline. However, they do play in online tournaments against Canadians and Americans. So specifically for North America, we will be talking about American players, and the American qualifiers are Umisho with Happy Chaos, Nubenheimer with Nagoriyuki, and Tempest with Leo Weifeng. As far as these three, if there are any better representatives of what's going on character-wise with this game, it's probably those three. Next, we have Europe. So generally, they describe it as Europe because the qualifiers are in Europe, but the European players and the Middle Eastern players play with each other quite a bit. So I generally call it EU, EMEA. So this is a pretty huge region, like widespread. So I wouldn't say there's like more players necessarily, but there is more variety of nations competing. Interestingly enough as well, this region and North America share a lot of opinions on characters actually. I don't think it's that different. Like there's some semantics about like specifically where certain characters belong, but at least from talking to players from this region, they share a lot of similar opinions with people from North America. So out of qualifying players, Zondo and Skill are from this region. And then finally, there is the Asia region. So we're really going to be talking about Japan and Korea for the most part, because these seem to be like the highest performing countries out of this region. But to my knowledge, I know China plays as well. I know there's Singaporean players. I know there's Filipino players. So there's more than just Japan and Korea. But people tend to focus on Japan and Korea because they just have the most well-known players. So the main interesting thing about this region is that one, generally, especially like way back in the day, like where I started, Japan was considered to be just the strongest region all the time. And two, they have quite different thoughts on how good characters are compared to the other regions. On top of that, there hasn't been a lot of true world competition, like people from all over the world competing against each other. There has been plenty of international competition, but there hasn't been like all of Japan pulls up or all of North America pulls up or anything like that. The first time that we really saw a lot of this was at Fighter Spirit, where a bunch of us, myself included, went to South Korea, but no one really went to Arc Revo Japan, and no one really went to Rev Major in the Philippines, in Manila. The players that qualified out of here are TY, Mochi, and Gobo. Next, let's talk story. So there's some important things going on in this tournament. Japan and Korea are sending two players that play multiple characters. So one of them is right here, this TY. So TY is known for Giovanna, but in Season 2, he started playing Chip, and in his qualifying run, he mostly played Chip. And two right here is Gobo. So they have him with Gold Lewis here because he won the Grand Finals with Gold Lewis, but he also plays Zato. There's kind of been this discussion of should players play multiple characters for tournaments, and overall, I want to say most people don't think so, or if they do, they're not acting on it. But in this case, there are multiple people coming out of this region that actually do that. Another thing to pay attention to are the characters that are showing. So the Asia region are also sending pretty unusual characters. So outside of Zato, where a lot of people, especially in North America, think Zato is stronger than what some tournament players say, like myself, for example. I think Zato is very good, or not top tier, but I've had arguments with people saying he's blatantly top tier, blah blah blah. So outside of Zato, they're sending Gold Lewis, Chip, Giovanna, and Soul. You can make an argument about Chip, about how common he is, but I don't think he's like heavily represented in top level play. I do think he is there though, just not like first of all, there's definitely nobody that's like, I really want to just like totally change what I'm gonna do and play a winning character. I'm gonna switch to Chip. Like, you don't really hear people talking about Chip like that. Giovanna, while represented here, rare at the end of a bracket. Soul, consistently downplayed here. And Gold Lewis, while considered strong, it kind of took a while for people to consider him very strong. And while he has strong representatives in North America and EU, he isn't like a consistent factor at the end of tournaments. Regobo won Rev Major and made Grand Finals at Arc Revo Japan. And on the subject of Soul, the Asia region thinks Soul is way stronger than North America and EMEA and EU think. And I experienced this personally. Again, like, I went to South Korea, I played against their Soul players, and the average Soul player, the average level is higher, and I learned a lot of stuff about Soul and also how to fight Soul by going over there. That's kind of when I started to change you might have noticed where I started to change my tune about Soul, and I was like, oh man, like I really got baited, and like people are downplaying him and stuff like that. So many people think Mochi is the strongest Soul's strongest soldier, if you will, and he's coming over to deal with, while maybe not like a totally open bracket, where a North American bracket is like a landmines of Leo, White Fang, Nagoriyuki, Happy Chaos, but he is going up against the best players of those characters in our region. And again, another regional difference. In Asia, in the Asian region, they don't really find Ram to be as strong as the other regions. They think the same about Happy Chaos as well, where like, oh, Happy Chaos is like good, but like he's not like that good, where a lot of the times, we've talked multiple times about maybe banning Happy Chaos, and Ramlethal ruins a lot of people's and a lot of characters' times. So that's another kind of interesting thing that will be happening in between the regions fighting each other this weekend. But then on the other hand, in my opinion, the best Leo players come out of North America. The Europe, EMEA region, and the Asia region does not have Leo players at the level of North America, which is a really big deal because Leo demands so much from their opponent in tournament. If you're not ready, you are truly going to get mauled. And the final thing to kind of pay attention to as far as like characters and regional differences is going to be Geo. So kind of like Soul, Geo is considered to be pretty strong in the Asia region. You always hear me, I actually always believe in this character, and I tried playing this character before season 2 to honestly good results. Like, I liked the character, and she helped me with the problems that I was having at the time. TY also won Arc Revo Japan in the previous year also, so he is not new to winning this tournament. Many people think he is pretty much the best Giovanna in the entire world, and she is a very rare tournament character in North America and EU and EMEA. So this aspect also could be kind of a problem because she's pretty explosive in tournament, and she has a lot of unique factors that other characters don't have that you have to be prepared for as well. And finally, there's one more thing we have to talk about as far as stories. So a lot of the things I've talked about is like character differences, who's popular where, who's representing who where. But the last really important thing is actually about the version of the game, because everyone who's qualified for this tournament has played on the previous patch except for Tempest, who won the most recent qualifier, which was Frosty Fausting, the first super major of the year, Frosty Fausting. So if someone had a particular really strong tactic that they abused to get through the bracket in a previous patch, that thing probably doesn't exist anymore in the current patch, and it could affect them. We'll go into this a little bit more later though. So next, I want to go through each of the players by region, and we're going to start with Umisho. So Umisho won EVO 2022 with Happy Chaos. So Umisho is kind of a newcomer to Guilty Gear from my perspective. Really started to dominate online tournaments a couple of months after Happy Chaos came out, and from there started just a really aggressive online presence. I mean, winning EVO is already hard enough, but winning EVO on your first try is extremely rare as well. Honestly, it's just super props to Umisho. This player, I want to say, is one of the first players who really focused on like optimizing Happy Chaos. So Umisho has a pretty unique, especially at the time, style to the character, where people now, a lot of people like imitate Umisho, but at the time the mix of mid-range, lots of offense, but then also neutral control was just really just not seen. And this character, you also need a ton of preparation and knowledge on the character to fight them effectively, on top of your character actually being able to fight Happy Chaos. Umisho, again, won EVO 2022 and also won East Coast Throwdown 2022 shortly after. So next we have Nubenheimer, another newcomer to Strive. I don't really know if he's played other fighting games. From talking to him just off and on, I've heard that he's really good in just like other general esports games. Umisho specifically as far as fighting games. Before that, she played, I want to say, Overwatch beforehand. So Nubenheimer also kind of like in that group. A lot of people thought Nago was really, really good in last fight, basically the best character, and myself included. And a combination of that with his like really focused, slow approach to the character makes him pretty threatening because he doesn't really waste resources, where some Nago players try to like just roll you over as quickly as possible, and then when it doesn't work, they rely on the normals that he has. But if a character could get around the normals, it could be pretty hard to turn the game around. Match knowledge is really, really important when you play a heavyweight, even no matter like how you feel about Nagoriyuki as a character. He really isn't that mobile. It's not like he's matching on DP or whatever. He has to use like system mechanics and like work his way out. So a lot of his threat just comes from being able to control neutral and being able to keep his turn and being able to kill you very quickly once he does start offense. Similar to Umisho, massive online presence, and then converting it into offline. CEO Taku was not just his first Guilty Gear Strive major, but just his first major period, and he won the major to qualify. This type of thing, again, is pretty uncommon in fighting games, so again, shoutouts to him, and he'll be representing Nagoriyuki. And then last from North America, we have Tempest NYC playing Leo, winner of ChadDrawsThings 2023. So again, like I mentioned, he's the only player to have qualified in the current patch. Every other player qualified in a previous patch. He's the only player to have won 2 super majors for this game, because he also won Combo Breaker, which before it's gonna sound funny, but before EVO 2022, it was the hardest tournament, and then EVO 2022 was the hardest tournament until Frosty 2023. Like, it's kind of cool what's going on in the game. And Tempest has a very consistent presence in this game so far. Specifically, he's pretty character focused and really tries to pick characters that both are strong, fits his playstyle, and fits what he thinks is important in the game. I've seen him play various anime games, and if you've been paying attention, you'd know him from games like BlazBlue Tag, or Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, or straight up BlazBlue. So next we are out to EU EMEA, and we must start with Uplon Skills. So Skills from France, very long time fighting game player. From talking to people, he's the player that people seem to know the least about, but I've known about him for more than 10 years because I've actually known about him from BlazBlue. But probably his most significant achievements in fighting games are from 3D fighters. So he's actually a rare player who is strong in both 2D, so like anime games, and 3D games. And probably like one of his crowning achievements, I would say, would be winning the Soul Calibur 6 World Invitational in 2019 with Mitsurugi. So he tends, from my perspective as a 2D player, to play fundamental characters. He plays Soul and Kai in Guilty Gear Strive, for example. And he is one of the people who are playing multiple characters. He used Soul and Kai to win this qualifier, but we don't know what his plans are for the actual final. So then we have Zondo Ramathal out of Israel. So he plays Ramathal, and he won the mix-up out in France. He also got second to skill at Versus Fighting 10. So there are a couple of people who are not qualified who were really close to qualifying multiple times. Latif was one of them. Leffen was another one of them. It's a couple of players who were kind of just always skirting along in like third, second. That's what's kind of tough about this format of you have to win the event, because you never know whose day it's gonna be, right? He's one of those Rams that make you feel bad about fighting Ram. That's probably the best way I could describe playing him. I played him for the first time at Frosty, actually, in some casuals. Outside of that, though, I don't have a lot of tournament history from him. The main thing that I know is that he plays my favorite character from Exord, Elfelt Valentine. So he's a big fan of the Valentine characters. But he's done a lot of work in tournaments in this game. Like I said, he got second at the previous qualifier, won this, and has been to North America to compete quite a bit. Finally, we have the Asia region. So out of Japan is TY on Chip and Geo. So for the tournament he actually qualified for, which is Arc Rebel Japan 2022, he used mostly Chip, but he did use a little Geo. The year before, he also won with Geo, and as I mentioned before, he pretty much put Geo on the map and made people starting to think that the character was incredibly strong. He specializes in characters that seem to be good at whip punishing because he plays Chip and Geo, and he plays Chip kind of similarly to Geo as well, using the fast movement to kind of like weave in and out there. He does have a history of Exerd playing Slayer, and while digging into past results, I also found that he plays M. Bison in Street Fighter V and has won a couple of events in Japanese Street Fighter V kind of early on. For North American and EU players, he's one of the biggest mysteries, especially because he didn't go to Fighter Spirit. So the one time that people from EU and North America did go to Asia to compete, he was not in attendance. So next we have Gobo out of Japan. Gobo, definitely a fan favorite for people. Apparently has a long history with fighting games in general. I remember when Red Bull Kumite dropped, they were talking about how he was a Zato player way back in Guilty Gear Sharp Reload, if I read that right. But for most North American or European players, the first time you probably heard about him was probably in Grand Blue Fantasy Versus or Exert, depending on how deep you are in the lore. He is an early Zato believer. There was a lot of characters when this game came out where people were like, this character is just dog, because they were so different from their previous versions, like Zato, like Chip, like Milia. And he was the player who won a really big tournament in Japan really early, going only Zato, and then won Red Bull Kumite with mostly Zato, but played the grand finals with Gold Lewis Dickinson. At this tournament as well, he played both Zato and Gold Lewis, so one of a tricky player in that you have to look out for two characters that require a really good amount of knowledge to fight effectively, and he has a lot of unique tactics that he uses that most people don't tend to use, or if you see more people doing it, it's because they saw him do it first. Kind of an innovator, I would say. So Mochi is probably your favorite Guilty Gear player's favorite Guilty Gear player, if that makes sense. Originally a Bridget player from Sharp Reload, so that's XX Sharp Reload. He evolved to be like a balance between like longer keep away types, so he had an amazing run in Grand Blue Fantasy Versus with Fairy, who's also kind of a long range whip plus trap type character, and fundamental characters like Soul, who he started in Exert. So this character is, I mean, honestly, he's one of the reasons why Asia thinks that Soul is so strong, the real hope of Soul players around the world, and he won Fighter Spirit in Korea to qualify, but his list of accomplishments is actually quite long in fighting games in general. And so the final thing I want to look at is the bracket. So it's your typical double elimination bracket. They picked who was going to go where. I want to say at the beginning of the month, or maybe like the last week of February, something like that. So match 1 is going to be Skill versus Gobo. Match 2 is going to be Mochi versus Nubenheimer. Match 3 is going to be TY versus Zondo, and match 4 is going to be Umisho versus Tempest NYC. So I'm also going to add a little bit of context for these matchups, both from like player and character perspective. So I think Skill versus Gobo is going to be pretty unpredictable, but the good news for Skill is that there's a lot of strong Zatos out of EU, so he will be able to get a lot of good Zato practice beforehand. So the main problem would be if Gobo picks Gold Lewis Dickinson. Also, Gobo has performed really well at qualifiers. Again, he won a qualifier and he got second at another qualifier. So he's been performing really well. So I think that's a pretty hard pull from him, but you can't count Skill out because he is a world-class player, as I mentioned before. Then we have Mochi versus Nubenheimer. So if you've been watching Mochi streams recently, or if you see any of the content vultures posting like Mochi matches for views or whatever, you would have noticed that Mochi's been playing a lot against top Asian Nagoriyuki players to get ready for Nubenheimer. It's not considered to generally be a good match for Soul, especially in the previous patch, and this is a pretty hard draw for him out of all the people he could have gotten. Now, on the other hand, though, most people think that Mochi is the best Soul, and while Nubenheimer is the strongest Nagoriyuki in North America, basically, the level of play for Soul here overall is not too high, so this one I feel like can really go either way. Then we have TY versus Zondo. So this is also a pretty interesting one. So there are pretty strong chip players out of EU and EMEA that Zondo has the opportunity to practice with. So the real mystery would be about, will TY play Geo to take advantage of potential lack of matchup knowledge? Generally, from what I've seen of TY playing tournaments, he'll play Chip versus Ram, but this factor does matter quite a bit in tournaments, so I'm pretty interested to see how that goes. And I didn't really mention this for Mochi technically, but TY straight up has not really played outside of Japan, to my knowledge, ever, where Mochi hasn't played outside of Asia. So Mochi went to, for example, Korea to compete, but hasn't really traveled outside of Asia. So I think Mochi will be a little bit calmer being in the US for the first time than someone like TY, maybe. And then finally, Umisho versus Tempest. So I actually had heard some people, just like on the wayside between like Twitter and stuff, complaining about this matchup being around 1-1. But I think no matter what, it was either going to be like a North American player versus another North American player, or a Japanese player versus another Japanese player, just because there were 3 of both of those qualifiers and then only 2 EU qualifiers. This matchup is a pretty interesting one. I think if I wanted to see another US versus US, it probably would have been like a Tempest Nubenheimer type, because one of the biggest conversations that was going around about the game from a competitive perspective is the Asia region's perspective on Happy Chaos and how they don't think Happy Chaos is as good as the other 2 regions think, where previous patch and especially on release, people were like, Bandit's character's broken, etc. So the thing about Umisho having to play Tempest is that we're seeing a pretty familiar matchup in North America, where if Umisho had to play, say, TY or Mochi or Gobo, it would be a really interesting style clash. Yep, that's an overview of the bracket. Really looking forward to this. In the case that I can't stream it, I did sign up for the like official co-streamer thing kind of late because they didn't advertise it that well. So depending on what happens, I might not be able to restream the tournament, but no matter what, I do want to do an overview of what's going on, because I think this tournament is really, really important, because it's unique in that it's an international qualifier, so it's guaranteed to be really high level play in between the regions that have been competing. Of course, this happens at tournaments like Evo, like Frosty, like Combo Breaker, but at these tournaments, it's like, who can show up to this, where here it's like they had a qualifier, we know who won, and everyone gathers for one more. So I find it to be really, really interesting and a great way to cap off season 2. As usual, let me know what you guys think. Gonna let you guys know again, posting both video requests videos on Patreon, and I've been gathering just like old stuff that has been hard to find, or maybe has been like straight up deleted because things like shoryuken.com has been deleted. So I've had articles in the past I used to write for them that I've put on there in a $1 tier, because Patreon doesn't let me do stuff for free. Boo-hoo. So if you're interested in that, feel free to go there. By the time this video is out, I should have announced my sub tournament for Twitch, where the top 3, I'll figure out a prize for top 3, but also the top 3 will be a team that I want to have for a separate 3v3 tournament, if you're interested in that as well. As usual, if you guys have any questions or comments, definitely feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Like or subscribe if you guys feel like it, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.